Greetings, Peter Nelson here with another episode or class from Hobie University. Today's topic, I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between sailing in flat water versus sailing in choppy or lumpy or wavy water. How you sail, particularly the Hobie 16, is what I'm going to mostly focus on because that's what I'm mostly familiar with. How you sail that boat in different water conditions will affect your speed around a course. So I typically will compare flat water with fresh water and lumpy or wavy water with salt water. It's not always true, but around where I live in the Seattle area of the United States, um, our freshwater venues are typically on lakes or rivers that typically don't get really big waves. Even in a pretty good breeze, there just isn't enough fetch to build up a significant wave set. Whereas the saltwater, particularly for us in the Puget Sound or the Pacific Ocean, the Caribbean, Atlantic, any of those places, Mediterranean, uh, the the waves in an open body of water will definitely build in a way that can affect how you sail your boat. Uh, so if you hear me interchange fresh and salt water, it's just because I'm thinking of uh, fresh water and flat water synonymously, and salt water and lumpy water synonymously. So hopefully we're clear on that. Flat water is the easiest. You get behind a dam on a river. That's especially the wind comes up over the dam and it is sheet on and bow down and go hard and fast. Um, Typically, that's the easiest to sail, you typically don't have a lot of rudder movement. So you want the rudder to be relatively quiet. The rudder is a brake on the B16. So, you want just small movements of the rudder when you're sailing in flat water. Uh, and you can actually sail a little. I said bow down, but you can actually sail a little higher than you might otherwise sail because you don't have those waves hitting the bow and stopping you. It's a fine line, so be careful not to sail too high. But generally speaking, in flat water, you have a much better chance to sail high upwind and low downwind. Uh, Also, in terms of wind strength, in light air, typically I sail a little lower, but in heavier air, just a little higher. But usually in heavier air, I don't have flat water unless I'm behind a dam. But generally speaking, um, you, in flat water where it's really not affecting anything, your boat speed not hitting the hull, just small changes in rudder movement will make a huge difference for you. So find your weight balance, your crew balance, where the boat is feeling really good. Keep it there if the wind is consistent, and just power on. Now, the tricky part is sailing in choppy water. Uh, Choppy water is where the boat, you have waves, 3, 4 foot waves or more from trough to crest, about 3 or 4 foot waves or more. And in choppy water, you want to really steer around the waves. Sometimes I call it steering around the Volkswagens, if you remember the Volkswagen Bug, because the waves get that big. And so there will be a lot more rudder movement in lumpy water. And for that, you really will benefit from looking much further upwind. The further you can look upwind, the better. Typically, 2 to 3 waves ahead and off of the going upwind, off of your weather bow, where the wind is coming from. And if you can look 2 and 3 waves ahead, what you find is that you can still see waves 1 and 2 kind of in your peripheral vision, you might say, and you already know what's there. Your mind has the memory. Oh yeah, wave 1 wasn't so bad, but wave 2 is big. And so you learn how I'll come up on wave 1, but boy, wave 2, maybe I come down, or maybe you go up, depending on the waves. We'll get to that momentarily. But looking further ahead and steering, basically upwind, you want to steer for the flat areas or the less wavy areas. Downwind, it's the opposite. If you can surf on a wave, that's a good thing. And again, this, I hate to say this because it really depends on the venue, but sometimes the flat water works a lot faster downwind. But a lot of times, being able to, if you can do it well, getting on a wave and riding that wave low will help. But let's switch back to upwind. When you're sailing upwind, you want to be looking, like I said, 2, 3, maybe even 4 waves out and steering for the flat areas. And so you're using a lot of tiller movement, a lot of rudder movement. If conditions allow and permit, maybe even some sheeting and unsheeting of the mainsail. And so when you, in the process, what you can do too is lean out further if you're trapping out, lean in as you move the boat around and through the waves. If it's a pretty consistent set of waves and there's really no getting around them, and even if, let me back up. A lot of times with waves, there are sets, and you'll find flat spots, and then you'll find a set where 2 to 4 to 5 waves will come in at a time. When you're in a flat spot, that's a good time to head up because you don't have the waves pounding your bow and slowing you down. But when you get into a wave set, there's a couple of ways that you can handle it, depending if it's a couple of just short waves, you might put the bow down and power through it. I was recently sailing in Costa Brava, Spain for the Worlds, where we had a really, really steep wave set. It was actually a lot of fun. And I was doing what the books were talking about, and it worked magnificent. We would get up on top of a wave on I'll just say on starboard, we'd get up on a wave, and I would steer down the backside of the wave and get a lot of momentum going. And once I hit the trough, then I would come up the face of the wave and until I hit the crest, and then I'd be back down on the back side of the wave. And you can just steer around like that. And it worked marvelously in those really steep wave conditions. It takes practice. Don't give up. Just keep trying. One final tip about sailing in really choppy conditions that I learned with my crew, Laura Sullivan. She was really good at experimenting. If you find the waves are just pounding you and slowing you down, they're not round, they're just coming at you and slowing you down. What we learned is that if you ease that jib off just a slight bit, the Hobie 16 is a fractional rig boat anyhow, so it's sailing on the main. You're not losing that much. And what happens is it lifts the bows up out of the water just by easing it off. We would sheet on really hard and it would drive the bows into the water. And as soon as we eased it off, the bows would float, and we could now float up and around the waves, and it was a lot easier to steer. And we got a little bit of a lift off of that jib, but we gained a lot in boat speed because we weren't getting pounded. So there's a little tip that you can try to, you just have to experiment. Just why you want to get out to a race course early to find out what kind of waves you've got and what technique is going to work. Uh, what are the wave set intervals? Can you power through them? Do you have to steer around them? Do you have to sheet that jib off a little bit? Those kinds of things will really help. So no one thing really works. I wish there was, but I'm sure that with experience, you'll figure it all out and you'll go a lot faster on the course. Good luck.